Hey everyone, Olivia here. And oh my goodness, do I have a story for you today. It's one of those, you will not believe what happened, kind of stories, and I'm just bursting to share it. It all started this morning. You see, I was running. Super late, completely chaotic, and in my rush, I did something I rarely ever do. I skipped breakfast. Honestly, I thought I could power through, just grab a coffee and be fine. Well, let me tell you, by mid-morning, I felt like a total zombie. My head was foggy, my energy was completely drained, and I could barely focus on my work. It was honestly hilarious, and also slightly terrifying, how quickly my brain turned to mush. I was stumbling around the office, forgetting things, and just generally feeling like I was in a daze. It was definitely a memorable experience, and I'm so excited to share the whole thing with you. So, let's begin our exciting journey of English improvement together. And remember, I release new videos daily focusing on English speaking and listening skills to help you improve and enjoy your learning journey. Sips imaginary tea, sighs contentedly. So, you know how I've been meaning to do something meaningful? Something more than just, existing? Well, last Tuesday, I finally did it. I volunteered at the Happy Paws Animal Shelter. And oh my goodness, what a day. It was a roller coaster, truly. A beautiful, heartbreaking, furry roller coaster. I'd imagined it'd be all sunshine and tail wags, right? Cuddles and happy barks. And there were those moments, flashes of pure joy, but there was so much more. The shelter itself, well, it wasn't quite the picture I had in my head. It wasn't gleaming and pristine, like in those adoption commercials. It was lived in. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of disinfectant, dry dog food, and that faint, almost sweet, undercurrent that, comes with a lot of animals. Not unpleasant, exactly, just potent. First, I met Mrs. Higgins, the shelter manager. A tiny woman with a voice that could command a pack of huskies. She had this no-nonsense air about her, but you could see the love for the animals etched on her face, like fine lines. She gave me the grand tour, explaining the daily routines, the feeding schedules, the cleaning protocols. It was a lot to take in. I felt a little overwhelmed, if I'm honest. My first task? Cleaning kennels. Now, I'm not squeamish, but, let's just say it wasn't glamorous. Scooping, scrubbing, wiping. It was surprisingly physical work. My back was aching by the time I finished the first row. But then, I met Barnaby. Barnaby was a beagle, maybe about 5 years old, with the saddest, most soulful eyes I've ever seen. He was curled up in the corner of his kennel, looking utterly dejected. He barely even looked up when I opened the gate to clean. My heart just squeezed. I crouched down, speaking softly, telling him what a good boy he was. He finally lifted his head, giving me a tentative sniff. His fur was matted in places, his tail tucked low. I finished cleaning as quickly as I could, then sat with him, just stroking his head. He leaned into my hand, letting out a little sigh. That small sound, it undid me. It was like he was carrying the weight of the world on his little beagle shoulders. And who knows what his story was? Abandoned? Lost? It broke my heart. After the kennels, I helped with feeding. Now, that was a spectacle. A cacophony of barks, meows, and the clatter of food bowls. Puppies tumbling over each other, vying for the best spot. Older dogs, patiently waiting their turn. Cats slinking around, observing the chaos with a detached amusement. It was overwhelming but invigorating. Life, in all its messy, noisy glory. In the afternoon, I got to walk some of the dogs. That was a learning experience. Let's just say leash training wasn't a top priority for some of these energetic pups. I got pulled, tripped, and covered in mud. At one point, I was practically water skiing across the grass as a particularly enthusiastic Labrador decided he'd spotted a squirrel. You should have seen me. I was a mess. But I was laughing. Really, truly laughing. It was pure, unadulterated joy. Even the mud felt good. Then there was Luna, a shy, timid greyhound. She trembled like a leaf when I clipped on her leash. We walked slowly, her staying close to my side. At first, she seemed terrified of everything, a rustling leaf, a passing car. But gradually, as we walked, she started to relax. Her tail even wagged a little. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a victory. A tiny flicker of hope in those big, frightened eyes. You know, it's strange. You go in thinking you're going to help these animals. And you do, in practical ways. But they give back so much more. They teach you patience, resilience, and the power of unconditional love. Even in the midst of uncertainty, they find ways to connect, to trust, to love. It's humbling. Later, I helped with socializing the cats. Now, I'm a dog person, always have been. But there was this one little ginger kitten, Clementine. Oh, Clementine. She was a tiny ball of fluff, barely bigger than my hand. She was so playful, so full of mischief. She'd pounce on anything that moved, a feather, a piece of string, my shoelaces. She purred like a tiny engine when I picked her up. I sat on the floor, letting her climb all over me, her tiny claws digging into my jeans. It was pure bliss. For that moment, all the sadness, all the uncertainty, just faded away. It was just me and Clementine, lost in a world of purrs and playful nips. As the day drew to a close, I felt exhausted, yes, but also full. Full of a strange mix of sadness and hope. Sadness for the animals still waiting for their forever homes, hope that they would find them soon. Leaving the shelter, I glanced back. Barnaby was watching me from his kennel. He gave a little woof, a tiny tail wag. It felt like a goodbye, a thank you. It was a moment I won't forget. The drive home was quiet. I just reflected. I thought about all the animals I'd met, their stories, their resilience. I thought about the dedicated staff, pouring their hearts and souls into caring for these creatures. It made me realize, there's so much good in the world, even in the messy, complicated bits. There's love, resilience, and hope, even in the saddest of places. So, yeah, volunteering at the shelter, it wasn't what I expected. It was harder, messier, and more emotionally challenging than I'd imagined. But it was also more rewarding, more meaningful. It was a day that changed me. Even thinking about it now, voice cracks a little, it makes me want to go back. And I will. Soon. Very soon. You know what I mean? It's like, you just can't help but feel connected. To them, to the cause, to something bigger than yourself. And that, well, that's a pretty amazing feeling. Smiles softly, takes another sip of imaginary tea. Okay, so, you are never going to believe what happened to me the other day. I mean, seriously. It all started with a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. You know those days, right? The kind where you wake up and think, well, this day could go either way. And then you decide, you know what? I'm gonna make it a good day. So I decided, spur of the moment, to visit this little thrift store tucked away in the older part of town. It's called Second Chances, which, let's be honest, is just the cutest name, isn't it? I haven't been there in ages, mostly because, well, life. You know how it gets. Work, errands, Netflix binges, the usual suspects. Anyway, the sun was shining, there was a gentle breeze, just perfect thrifting weather, really. I parked the car, and as I walked towards the store, I could already smell that unique thrift store aroma. It's a mix of old books, vintage perfume, and, I don't know, maybe a hint of mothballs? It's hard to describe, but it's definitely a thing, right? It always takes me right back to my childhood, rummaging through my grandmother's attic. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, and the little bell above it jingled, that classic thrift store sound. The store was dimly lit, filled with overflowing racks of clothes, stacks of mismatched china, and furniture that looked like it had a story or two to tell. Honestly, it felt like stepping into a time capsule. I started with the clothes, naturally. Rows and rows of them, all whispering their silent histories. I love the idea that each piece has lived a whole life before it lands on that hanger. Who wore this dress to their first date? Who spilled coffee on this shirt during a particularly important meeting? You just never know. It's like a treasure hunt, really. I was flipping through a rack of vintage blouses, mostly polyester and floral prints. Not really my style, but you never know what gems might be hiding when something caught my eye. It was a deep emerald green dress tucked away at the back, almost hidden. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the soft, velvety fabric. It felt expensive. Like, really expensive. I pulled it out. It was a simple, elegant slip dress, the kind that just skims your body. The fabric shimmered in the dim light. There was a tiny label sewn inside the collar, Valentino. My jaw dropped. Valentino? In a thrift store? I mean, come on. I checked the price tag. $5. $5. I couldn't believe my eyes. I felt my heart start to race a little, like I'd stumbled upon a buried treasure. You know that feeling, right? The thrill of the find. I grabbed the dress and practically ran to the fitting room, which, let's be real, was more like a curtained-off corner. The mirror was slightly warped, adding a funhouse effect to the whole experience. I slipped the dress on, holding my breath. And it fit. Perfectly. Like it had been made for me. It was a Cinderella moment, except instead of a glass slipper, I had a $5 Valentino dress. I twirled in front of the warped mirror, feeling like $1,000,000. Okay, maybe $5. But still, I knew I had to buy it. I mean, it was fate, right? I clutched the dress to my chest and headed to the checkout counter, where a sweet, elderly woman with bright pink lipstick was sorting through a pile of vintage postcards. "Find anything nice, dear?" she asked, her voice warm and crinkly. "Oh, just this," I said, trying to sound nonchalant as I laid the dress on the counter. I didn't want to give away my excitement, you know? Like, oh, this old thing? Just a $5 Valentino, no big deal. She looked at the dress, then back at me, her eyes widening. "My goodness," she said, "that's beautiful. A real find." She rang me up, and I practically skipped out of the store, clutching my treasure. I couldn't wait to tell someone about my amazing find. I called my best friend, Sarah, immediately. "You are not going to believe this," I started, and then proceeded to recount the whole story, every detail, every emotion. She was just as excited as I was, which, let's be honest, is what best friends are for, right? Later that evening, I decided to do a little research on the dress. Just out of curiosity, you know? I typed, "vintage Valentino slip dress," into Google, and, well, let's just say my $5 Cinderella moment quickly turned into a bit of a reality check. Turns out, vintage Valentino slip dresses can be worth thousands of dollars. Thousands. My heart started pounding again, but this time, it was a different kind of pounding. Holy moly, I might be holding a small fortune, kind of pounding. I spent the next hour scrolling through images, comparing my dress to the ones online. The details matched. The fabric, the label, everything. It was the real deal. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept getting up to look at the dress, hanging in my closet like a magical garment. My mind was racing. Should I sell it? Should I keep it? Could I even bring myself to wear it, knowing its potential value? The next day, I decided to take it to a vintage clothing appraiser, just to be sure. I was nervous. What if it was a fake? What if I had gotten my hopes up for nothing? The appraiser, a stylish woman with a magnifying glass, examined the dress carefully, inside and out. She pointed out details I hadn't even noticed, like the hand stitching and the unique construction of the lining. Then she looked at me, a smile playing on her lips. "This," she said, "is the real deal. A beautiful piece, in excellent condition. It could fetch you quite a sum at auction. I felt a wave of, well, it was a complicated feeling. Relief, definitely. But also, a little bit of sadness. I had fallen in love with this dress. The idea of parting with it felt like saying goodbye to a friend. After much deliberation, I decided to sell it. It was a difficult decision, but it just made practical sense. The money could go towards, well, a lot of things. A down payment on a car? A much-needed vacation? A lifetime supply of thrift store adventures? The possibilities seemed endless. The dress sold at auction for a price that still makes me a little dizzy to think about. It was more than I ever could have imagined. And you know what? It felt good. It felt like the universe had winked at me, given me a little gift, a second chance. Just like the name of the store, right? So, yeah, that's my thrift store story. Pretty crazy, right? It taught me that you never know what treasures are hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. And sometimes, the most unexpected finds can lead to the biggest surprises. And who knows, maybe someday I'll find another $5 Valentino. A girl can dream, right? Anyway, tell me what you've been up to. Any thrifting adventures of your own? I'm all ears. Learning a new language, especially speaking it fluently, can sometimes feel like climbing a mountain, right? But if you believe you can, you're halfway there. Think about it. Believing in yourself unlocks this incredible energy and confidence. It's like turning on a light inside, illuminating the path ahead and making the entire journey feel not just possible, but enjoyable too. You've already started, and that's a huge step. You know what can be surprisingly helpful? Telling stories to an imaginary friend. Picture this. You're cooking dinner and chatting away to your invisible buddy about your day, or maybe you're on a walk narrating an exciting adventure you've dreamt up. It might sound silly, but it gets you comfortable forming sentences and expressing yourself without any pressure. Plus, it's actually fun. Feeling discouraged after slow progress is completely normal. We all experience it. It's like you're putting in the effort but don't always see the results immediately. Maybe you understand everything you hear, but when it's your turn to speak, your mind goes blank. That feeling is so relatable, and you're definitely not alone in experiencing it. It's all part of the process. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I was so focused on grammar that I almost forgot to actually speak. And you know what? It slowed me down. It got me thinking, do you prefer to learn grammar rules or just practice speaking? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Let's chat in the comments below. Okay, so, you are never going to believe what happened to me at the farmer's market last Saturday. Seriously. Grab a cuppa, settle in, because this is a story. It all started so innocently, you know? The sun was just peeking over the rooftops, casting this gorgeous golden glow across everything. I'd woken up feeling, I don't know, lighter than air. Like anything was possible. It was one of those perfect autumn mornings where the air is crisp but the sun still has a bit of warmth to it. You know, the kind of day that just begs you to go outside and do something. So, I decided to head down to the local farmer's market. Now, this isn't just any farmer's market. This is the one everyone talks about. It's a little out of the way, tucked down a winding lane behind the old mill, but it's totally worth the trek. They've got everything there, fresh baked bread, mountains of vibrant veggies, locally sourced honey, you name it. And the atmosphere? Electric. It's buzzing with chatter, laughter, the clinking of coins, and, oh, the smells. I was practically skipping down the street, my wicker basket swinging happily in my hand. I'd even put on my favorite red scarf, just to feel extra festive, you know? I had a vague plan to buy some apples for a pie, Granny Smith, ideally, because they're just the perfect tartness, and maybe some fresh herbs. But honestly, I mostly just wanted to soak in the atmosphere and enjoy the morning. The moment I turned the corner into the market square, I was hit by this wave of sensory overload, in the best possible way. The air was thick with the aroma of cinnamon buns and freshly brewed coffee. There was a guy playing the accordion, a little off-key, but charming nonetheless, and children were running around, chasing pigeons. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a second, and just smiled. Pure bliss. First stop, the bakery stall. Now, this baker, Mrs. Henderson, she's a legend. Her sourdough is famous throughout the county, and let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I was about to ask for a loaf when I saw them, pumpkin spice muffins. And not just any pumpkin spice muffins, but muffins with these gorgeous, glistening crumb toppings. My willpower crumbled faster than a stale biscuit. "I'll take 2, please," I heard myself say, even though I had absolutely no need for 2 pumpkin spice muffins. 0. But they smelled so divine, I just couldn't resist. Next, I wandered over to the fruit and veg stalls, my basket now slightly heavier. Everywhere I looked, there were piles of colorful produce, plump tomatoes, glossy aubergines, bunches of kale the size of my head. It was like a feast for the eyes. I found the apples, a beautiful stack of Granny Smiths, just as I'd hoped, and carefully chose a few. Then, I spotted the most incredible-looking peaches. They were almost glowing, a deep, rich orange, and they smelled like sunshine. I had to have some. As I was reaching for a peach, I bumped into someone. "Oh, excuse me," I said, turning around. And guess who it was? My old school friend, Sarah. We hadn't seen each other in ages, maybe 10 years? We hugged, laughed, caught up on each other's lives right there amongst the carrots and cabbages. It was so unexpected and lovely. We chatted for a good half hour, reminiscing about old times, sharing stories about our kids, you know, all the important stuff. It was like no time had passed at all. After saying goodbye to Sarah, I realized my basket was getting quite full. I had apples, peaches, muffins, a loaf of sourdough, I couldn't resist in the end, some fresh herbs, and a jar of local honey. I was feeling pretty pleased with my haul. I was just about to head home when I saw a small stall tucked away in the corner, almost hidden behind a display of giant pumpkins. It was a flower stall, overflowing with the most beautiful blooms I'd ever seen. Sunflowers, dahlias, cosmos in every shade imaginable, it was breathtaking. I knew I didn't need flowers, but they were so gorgeous, and the woman selling them was so sweet. I ended up buying a small bunch of vibrant orange and yellow sunflowers. They just screamed, autumn, you know? So, there I was, walking home, my basket laden with goodies, a bunch of sunflowers bobbing cheerfully in my hand, and this warm, fuzzy feeling in my chest. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I felt content. Utterly and completely content. But remember I said you weren't going to believe what happened? Well, here it is. I got home, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and tripped. Tripped over the doormat, of all things. My basket went flying, apples and peaches rolled across the floor, the jar of honey shattered, and my beautiful sunflowers landed in a puddle of sticky sweetness. It was a disaster. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the mess, feeling utterly deflated. All that joy, all that lovely morning, ruined. I wanted to cry. Then, I started to laugh. I mean, really laugh. What else could I do? It was so ridiculous, so me. I'm always the one who trips, spills things, drops things, it's my superpower. I cleaned up the mess, salvaged what I could, and then, you know what I did? I baked that apple pie. And while it was baking, filling my kitchen with the warm, comforting scent of cinnamon and apples, I realized something. Yes, I'd made a mess. Yes, I'd lost some of my lovely market finds. But the important things, the sunshine, the laughter with Sarah, the feeling of connection, the simple joy of being alive, those things hadn't been broken. They were still there, tucked away safely inside me. And that, my friend, is what truly matters. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that was my day at the farmer's market. A little chaotic, a little messy, but ultimately, perfectly imperfect. Just like life, right? Okay, so, you are never going to believe what happened to me last weekend. I decided, in a moment of sheer madness, I know, to tackle a DIY project. A big one. You know how I've always wanted a little reading nook, right? Like, a proper, cozy escape with shelves and a comfy chair, a place to disappear with a good book and a cup of tea? Well, I finally decided to stop dreaming and do it. It all started innocently enough. A Saturday morning, sun streaming through the window, birds chirping, you know, the kind of morning that makes you feel all optimistic and capable. I'd been pinning DIY reading nook ideas for months, and I'd finally found the perfect one. A built-in bookshelf around a window seat. Ambitious? Maybe. Crazy? Definitely. But did I let that stop me? Of course not. So, off I went to the hardware store. Now, I have to confess, I'm not exactly handy. I mean, I can just about change a light bulb without electrocuting myself, but power tools? Timber? Let's just say we're not on speaking terms. So, imagine me, surrounded by all this stuff, feeling completely out of my depth. The smell of sawdust and varnish hung heavy in the air, and the sounds of buzzing saws and clanging metal echoed around me. I felt like a lost lamb in a lumberjack convention. Anyway, I eventually managed to find a helpful, and incredibly patient, assistant who guided me through the lumber aisle. I explained my vision, using a lot of hand gestures and vague descriptions, and he somehow managed to translate my gibberish into a list of actual materials. I left the store with a car full of wood, screws, brackets, and a feeling of impending doom. Back home, I laid everything out in the living room, trying to make sense of it all. The instructions I'd printed out looked deceptively simple, all neat diagrams and concise steps. But staring at those pieces of wood, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Where do I even begin? You know that feeling, right? Like you're staring at a disassembled IKEA wardrobe and questioning all your life choices? I took a deep breath, put on some upbeat music, essential for any DIY project, in my opinion, and decided to just start. The first step was measuring and cutting the wood for the frame. Easy peasy, right? Wrong. My measurements were, let's just say, creative. And my sawing? Oh, the sawing. Let's just say it was less straight line and more jagged, wobbly mess. The sound of the saw was ear-splitting, and the sawdust flew everywhere, coating the room in a fine layer of wood dust. I looked like I'd wrestled a bear in a sawmill. And then came the power drill. Now, I'd always been a little intimidated by power tools. They seem so powerful and loud, and prone to causing accidental dismemberment. But, I told myself, I'm a strong, independent woman. I can handle a power drill. Famous last words, right? I plugged it in, took a deep breath, and squeezed the trigger. The drill whirred to life, and the bit started spinning at a dizzying speed. I tentatively approached the wood, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror. And then, it happened. The drill slipped, the wood splintered, and the whole thing jumped out of my hands, narrowly missing my foot. I swear, my heart stopped for a beat. I stood there, frozen, staring at the mangled piece of wood, the drill buzzing menacingly on the floor. Right then, I almost gave up. I really did. I wanted to just sweep all the wood into a pile, curl up in a ball, and cry. But then, I remembered why I started. I wanted that reading nook. I wanted that cozy escape. And I wasn't going to let a rogue power drill defeat me. So, I picked myself up, dusted myself off, literally, and started again. This time, I went slower, more carefully. I measured twice, cut once, most of the time. I even managed to get the hang of the power drill, without any further near-death experiences. Slowly but surely, the frame started to take shape. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. There were gaps, and wonky angles, and a Few, interesting, design choices, let's just call them rustic. But it was mine. I'd built it, with my own 2 hands, and a lot of help from YouTube tutorials. The next few hours were a blur of hammering, sawing, sanding, and painting. I learned a lot that day. I learned that wood glue is surprisingly sticky. I learned that sanding is a surprisingly good workout. And I learned that I have a surprising amount of patience, and a surprising tolerance for sawdust. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it was finished. The bookshelf was built, the window seat was installed, and the cushions were in place. It wasn't perfect, but it was perfect for me. I sank into the cushions, a cup of tea in hand and a book open on my lap, and just breathed. The sun streamed through the window, warming my face, and the birds chirped outside. It was exactly what I'd envisioned. My own little sanctuary. My own little piece of heaven. You know, it's funny. Looking back, I realize that the finished product wasn't the most important thing. It was the process, the struggle, the sense of accomplishment. It was the realization that even someone as unhandy as me could create something beautiful, something functional, something real. It was a reminder that sometimes, the best things in life are the ones we build ourselves, imperfections and all. So, yeah, maybe my reading nook isn't exactly Pinterest worthy, but it's mine, and I love it. And that, my friend, is all that matters. Now, what do you think? Fancy a cuppa in my new reading nook? Learning a new language, especially English, can feel like climbing a mountain, right? But the more you enjoy it, the faster you'll learn. Think of it this way. When you're having fun, you're not even focusing on the effort. You're just absorbed in the experience, and that's when the magic happens. You pick things up quicker, you remember them better, and suddenly, you're speaking more fluently without even realizing it. It's all about finding that joy in the journey. You know what can really help with that? Practicing dialogues from movies. I find myself doing this sometimes while I'm cooking dinner. I'll pick a favorite scene and try to recreate the lines, mimicking the actor's intonation and expressions. It's surprisingly fun and such a natural way to improve your pronunciation and fluency. Plus, you're already familiar with the context, so it makes it easier to remember the phrases. It's a little secret weapon for everyday practice. Hearing native speakers and thinking you'll never catch up is something I think we all go through, doesn't it? It can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes, like listening to a fast-flowing river and wondering how you'll ever be able to keep up. You understand what they're saying, but forming your own sentences and responding quickly just seems so far away. It's totally normal to feel that way, trust me. Just remember, every native speaker was once a beginner too. And you know what? This reminds me of something. I was at a coffee shop the other day and I overheard 2 people chatting away in English. They were clearly having such a great time practicing with each other. It got me thinking, have you tried joining any English-speaking clubs or groups? It can be such a supportive and encouraging environment, where you can practice freely without feeling self-conscious. You might even make some new friends along the way. Okay, so, picture this, right? It's a Saturday. Like, a really beautiful Saturday. Sunlight streaming in through the kitchen window, dust motes dancing in the golden rays. You know, that kind of perfect Saturday that makes you want to do something different. Something fun. Something, maybe a little disastrous. That's the kind of Saturday that led to our epic, Let's Try New Recipes, adventure. We're a family of foodies, I guess you could say. But not like fancy foodies. More like, we love to eat. And my mom? My mom has this cookbook. It's ancient. Seriously, I think it's older than I am. Covered in stains, the spine's cracked, pages are falling out. It's seen some things. And in this culinary Bible are recipes that have been, well, let's just say, untested by our family. For years. Decades, even. So, on this particular perfect Saturday, I'm flipping through this ancient tome, and I land on this recipe for apricot and almond tagine with preserved lemons. It sounded exotic, adventurous, completely out of our usual comfort zone of spaghetti and meatballs. And suddenly, I had this burning desire to make it. I announced my intention to the family. My dad, bless his heart, just raised an eyebrow and went back to reading the newspaper. He's the, if it ain't broke don't fix it, type when it comes to food. My little brother, Leo, who's 10 and lives on chicken nuggets, scrunched up his nose and made gagging sounds. But my mom? Her eyes lit up. A fellow adventurer. Let's do it, she declared. And that's how we found ourselves, a couple of hours later, elbow deep in ingredients we'd never even heard of before. Preserved lemons? What even are preserved lemons? They looked like, well, like someone had pickled a lemon and forgotten about it for a few years. The smell was interesting. Kind of citrusy, kind of fermented, kind of. I don't even know. We chopped and diced, stirred and simmered, following the cryptic instructions in the ancient cookbook. A pinch of saffron, it said. What constitutes a pinch? Who knows? We eyeballed it. A generous handful of coriander. Whose hand? A giant's? We guessed. The whole process was one big guessing game, punctuated by bursts of laughter and moments of sheer panic. Is this supposed to be this color? I asked my mom, holding up a pot of what looked suspiciously like swamp water. She peered into it, her brow furrowed. I don't know, she admitted. But we persevered. We soldiered on, fueled by a mixture of blind faith and the intoxicating aroma of spices that slowly began to fill the kitchen. Cinnamon, ginger, cumin. They swirled together in the air, creating this warm, exotic fragrance that hinted at something. Something good, maybe? Then came the apricots. Now, we're used to apricots. We eat them fresh, we eat them dried. But we'd never cooked with them before. The recipe called for us to add them to the swamp water, and let them simmer until tender. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. See, we didn't realize that apricots, when cooked, kind of disintegrate. They just melt. So, what started as plump, orange halves transformed into this mush. Apricot mush, floating in swamp water. It was not a pretty sight. Oh dear, my mom said, her voice laced with a mixture of amusement and horror. Leo, who had been observing the whole process with a mixture of fascination and disgust, piped up, "It looks like baby food." He wasn't wrong. But, you know what? We didn't give up. We'd come too far. We stirred in the almonds, hoping they'd add some much-needed texture to the apricot mush, and crossed our fingers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tagine was ready. It didn't look particularly appetizing, I'll be honest. It was still kind of mushy. And the color was, well, let's just say it was unique. But the smell? Oh, the smell was incredible. It was rich and complex, and utterly captivating. We cautiously served ourselves, exchanging nervous glances. My dad, ever the pragmatist, had a backup plan, a frozen pizza waiting in the wings, just in case. Then, we took a bite. And, it was, surprisingly good. Like, really good. The sweetness of the apricots, the crunch of the almonds, the tang of the preserved lemons, which, it turns out, are actually pretty delicious. The warmth of the spices, it all came together in this unexpected symphony of flavors. My dad, who had been eyeing the frozen pizza with a longing gaze, actually put down his fork and said, "Wow." Leo, Mr. Chicken Nugget himself, even had a second helping. We sat around the table, eating our strange, mushy, delicious tagine, laughing about the near disasters and marveling at our accidental culinary triumph. The kitchen was a mess, the cookbook was even more stained than before, but we were happy. We had created something together. Something new, something different, something, well, something ours. And that, you know, that's the magic of trying new recipes with your family. It's not always pretty. It's often messy. There are almost certainly going to be mistakes. But it's also an adventure. A chance to connect, to laugh, to create memories. And sometimes, just sometimes, you stumble upon something truly delicious. After that experience, we became a little bolder in the kitchen. We started pulling out that old cookbook more often, flipping through its stained pages with a sense of excitement and anticipation. We tried other recipes, some successful, some not so much. There was the time we attempted to make homemade pasta that ended up looking like, well, let's just say it didn't resemble pasta at all. And then there was the infamous Great British Bake Off incident where we tried to make a tiered cake that collapsed into a sugary heap. But you know what? Even the failures were fun. Because we were doing it together. We were learning, we were experimenting, we were creating memories. And that, to me, is what cooking is all about. It's not just about the food. It's about the experience. It's about the shared laughter, the little disasters, the surprising triumphs. It's about making something together, even if it ends up looking like baby food. Because, let's face it, life is too short to eat boring food. And it's definitely too short to not have fun in the kitchen. Right? Right. So, grab your family, grab a crazy recipe, and get cooking. You never know what culinary masterpiece you might accidentally create. And even if it's a disaster, you'll have a good story to tell. Just like this one. So, yeah, that's the story of our apricot and almond tagine adventure. What about you? Any kitchen disasters you want to share? I'm all ears. So, you want to hear about how I learned to play the trumpet? Grab a cuppa, settle in, because this is a story, a real saga, you know? It all started, gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago, back in 4th grade. I remember the day the music teacher, Mrs. Davison, with her swishy floral skirts and a smile that could melt glaciers, came into our classroom. She had this big, mysterious case. Intrigue hung in the air, thick as the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. She opened it, and there they were, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, trumpets, trombones, clarinets, a whole brass and woodwind family just waiting for a home. Now, I was a shy kid, a real wallflower. Recess involved a lot of solitary swinging and staring at the clouds. But something about the trumpet, that shiny brass, the valves, the promise of noise, it called to me. It whispered promises of being different. So, I signed up. My parents, bless their hearts, were supportive, though I suspect a little bewildered. We weren't a musical family. Our house was filled more with the comforting clatter of dishes and the murmur of the evening news than melodies. The first few weeks? Let's just say they were humbling. You know that sound a dying walrus might make? Yeah, pretty close. My lips felt like rubber, my cheeks ached, and the only notes I could produce were squeaks and splutters. I remember practicing in my room, the late afternoon sun painting stripes across the carpet, feeling utterly defeated. My little brother would stand outside my door, mimicking my strangled attempts, which, you know, was super encouraging. Not Mrs. Davison, though, she was a saint. Patient, kind, never once flinched at my cacophony. She showed me how to hold the instrument, how to shape my embouchure, fancy word for lip position, by the way, how to breathe. It felt like learning a new language, a language of breath and brass. Slowly, painstakingly, things started to change. One day, a clear note rang out. A real, honest-to-goodness see. I remember stopping mid-breath, staring at the trumpet like it was a magical artifact. Had I actually done that? My mom poked her head in, a questioning look on her face. Was that music? She asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. I grinned, a wide, cheesy grin that probably made me look like a startled chipmunk. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. From then on, I was hooked. I practiced every day, sometimes for hours, much to the chagrin of my brother and the neighborhood dogs. My bedroom transformed into a personal concert hall, or maybe a torture chamber, depending on who you asked. I started to recognize the patterns in the music, the subtle shifts in rhythm, the dance between the notes. It wasn't just noise anymore, it was a story, a conversation. I was learning to speak through the brass. Of course, there were still plenty of mishaps. Like the time I dropped my trumpet down the stairs. Dent the size of a dime. My heart sank. It felt like I'd broken a bone. Or the time I tried to play a high C during a concert and ended up sounding like a strangled chicken. My face burned crimson. But, you know what? Even the mistakes, the embarrassments, they became part of the journey. They taught me resilience, humility, and the importance of not taking myself too seriously. Middle school brought band class, a whole new world of musical camaraderie and competition. We learned marches, concert pieces, even a little jazz. I wasn't a natural soloist, never craved the spotlight, but I loved the feeling of being part of something bigger, the collective breath and vibration of the entire band creating something beautiful. Remember those cheesy after-school specials about the power of teamwork? Turns out, there's some truth to them. High school was a blur of football games, pep rallies, and late-night rehearsals. The smell of stale popcorn and instrument cleaner became synonymous with Friday nights. We played everything from Sousa marches to Queen medleys. I even had a little solo in our rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody. Don't ask me to recreate it now, though. Stage fright and I were, well, let's just say we weren't on speaking terms. And then, college. I joined the university pep band, a motley crew of musicians, mostly there for the free pizza and the chance to make some glorious noise. We weren't exactly the New York Philharmonic, but we had fun, and the energy in the stadium during those basketball games was electric. You could feel the music vibrating through your bones. It was addictive. I eventually stopped playing regularly after college. Life, you know? It has a way of taking over. Career, family, responsibilities, they all sort of muscled their way in. The trumpet ended up tucked away in its case, a silent testament to a different time. But you know what's funny? Even though I haven't played seriously in years, the music is still there, inside me. Sometimes, when I hear a particularly beautiful trumpet solo, I can almost feel the vibrations in my lips, the familiar weight of the instrument in my hands. It's a part of who I am, woven into the fabric of my being. So, how did I learn to play the trumpet? With a lot of patience, a little bit of talent, a whole lot of perseverance, and a dash of good humor. It wasn't always easy, there were definitely moments of frustration and self-doubt, but looking back, it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. It taught me more than just how to play an instrument, it taught me about discipline, dedication, and the power of community. And, you know, it's a pretty cool party trick. Though maybe I'll stick to telling stories instead. What do you say? Another cup of tea? Well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. It really means a lot to have you here and to stay connected. I always enjoy our time together. I hope you'll follow, like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss our daily English speaking and listening practice. You know, before we go, it made me wonder, is there a book you're planning to start reading? It is always so lovely to hear what everyone is thinking about, and sharing your plans in the comments is a wonderful way to practice expressing yourself and connecting with others. I find it so inspiring to hear what you're all up to. See you tomorrow, and remember to take good care of yourselves and keep practicing. You're doing great.